Welcome friends, Joshino here. Today I'm going to talk about the flow of battle in Planetside 2, and some ways I think it could be improved. This video will touch on the lattice system, spawns, and base design, which will mostly focus on small facilities. As a disclaimer, this isn't a moan, it is just looking at some possible ways things could be changed. Also, there are quite a few ideas in here that I have positives and negatives. Really, I'm trying to foster discussion rather than to say do this or do that. First of all, by flow, I mean where populations congregate and how fights evolve from base to base. One of the main problems I see in the fundamental way these populations move from base to base is that the small facilities with one point are simply not large enough or designed properly to hold 48 plus versus 48 plus Zergs. These facilities seem to act as bottlenecks and a complete stop to the flow of troops. For however long the cap time is anyway. And most of these small bases consist of just a few buildings and small space around them. People pop in and out due to the render system not being able to cope. Furthermore, as the spawns are so close, there usually is only one or two ways to get out. With the amount of people on a base, it is extremely easy to completely shut down the spawn room. And for me, spawn camping is one of the biggest put downs for the game. I hate participating in spawn camping and also hate being spawn camped. The way I see it is the dev team has tried to make each base into a concentrated area for a fight, basically like a contained map in Battlefield. However, this is at the cost of the surrounding map, which gets so sadly underused, and the very occasional skirmishes between bases can be more fun than the fights inside the closed segments of the facilities themselves. Although I'm not saying that fighting inside buildings, holding corners and slow pushes aren't fun, but they currently dominate the majority of gameplay time in Planetside 2. Now I don't want to blame the lattice system itself for making a linear progression for taking lanes of bases, as those of us playing in the hex system know that back then, populations of enemy would simply just avoid each other and ghost cap. That system had its own set of flaws. So what can be done to alleviate these fights? Well, one idea would be to make it so that small facilities have their points instantly flip the base rather than having a point with a capture time, as most small facilities lie between larger multi-point facilities. This could make it so that there are larger fights in between bases, rather than stuck at the small facilities, and that small facilities attract smaller squads to try and hold as an ulterior objective away from the main facility. The downsides of this system would that it could foster ghost capping of small facilities, and it could also mean that basically the smaller facilities are sidestepped, and we end up having more concentrated fights on the copy and paste bases like the amp stations, tech plants and biolabs. Another problem I see with the flow, and partly to do with the base designs, trying to be compact secluded fights, is that usually after a small initial push and sunders are set up, vehicles lose a lot of their value and are stuck outside, trying to pick off some unlucky low battle rank that finds himself in the wrong place. This is obviously much worse on Esamir or Walsamir, but is the case in a lot of the other continents. Although there is some need for them to protect friendly sunderers, and vice versa with armoured columns being quite useful in taking out deployed sunderers. However, I feel that mostly tanks are redundant, and bases where tanks can get inside, it is often too claustrophobic and easy to be C4'd by a light assault. I feel this is quite a big shame, and that something could be done to make them actually have a tangible importance on the battlefield. One way is described above, in trying to make it so that the fights aren't concentrated on small facilities, but between them, where tanks actually are able to manoeuvre and also engage with other tanks. Another way could be to implement vehicle capture points outside of bases, perhaps adding a multiplier to how fast the base caps, or stopping resources on that hex, like a blockade. Something to make it so that there is a need for tanks to be in the area, and also a big reason for defenders to want to bring their own armour to try and stop them. I will say that the anti-vehicle turret in its current form also doesn't help armoured columns, but it doesn't quite fit into this video's discussion. Something that further compounds the problems with small bases becoming huge camp stalemates is Redeployside. This has been talked about by other people and is something that seems to generally rile up most of the Planetside 2 community. I don't want to cover tactics and other issues it creates as much as the very basic flow of battle. Anyway, a lot of the time the small camp bases will completely blow out of proportion, because people see a large 96 plus fight and hop over any way possible, which as mentioned adds to the problem of these bases being complete stops to the flow of battle and either being camped for 1 minute or so, or sometimes becoming unbreakable small holds with hundreds of combatants. Furthermore, the fact you can spawn right into the base across the map, or to a Sundra closer, makes it so there won't be so many troops in between the bases, and they will always be concentrated in these small secluded fights. Lastly, on the lines of spawn camping, it could always be an option to completely get rid of the above ground spawn rooms altogether. I have seen other posts on making the spawns on bases drop pods, so you never know quite where to camp, as a spawn tube would have some of the same problems spawn rooms have now. The attackers just sit and camp them. However, and why I mention this lastly, is that with a base capping fairly instantly, this problem would likely be solved anyway. But some negatives I can see with this are that it may damage the squad meta of being able to group up in a spawn room ready to push. Although again, with Redeployside, a max crash can appear from thin air, with populations hitting a button to get there, and that's actually quite damaging. So I'm not sure whether I actually feel that it's important to have a spawn room ready to push. I am genuinely interested in what everyone else thinks, and if they agree with my general feelings of the flow of battles being quite restrictive and claustrophobic. And does anyone else have any solutions I haven't thought of, or any critique or additions to my own suggestions? Be sure to put anything in the comments below. And finally, it would be quite interesting to see all this pan out in an alert, or generally, hopefully, improving the flow would mean that taking a continent won't be such a ridiculous feat, and that could add to the meta. Anyway, thank you all very much for watching. If you want to tune in for more, hit that subscribe button, and like it if you enjoyed it, it does really help. Until next time everyone, Joshino.